Morning, everybody. Happy Easter. Really, really good to see you. Fantastic to be able to welcome you in to Greenfinch this morning for probably the biggest day in the Christian calendar, Easter Sunday or Resurrection Sunday. Before we kind of kick into it, let me extend to you a super warm welcome, especially for those of you who are kind of here for the very first time or visiting with us. Really, really great to have you with us. If that is you, my name's Pete, and great to be able to welcome you along. And even better to be able to welcome you on a Sunday where we are going to get to the heart of the message. Because Easter Sunday is really the center point. This is kind of the bottom line, what it all comes down to. Resurrection Sunday is the day that changes everything. It's the day, the event that changes the course of human history. It changes everything for everyone. A day that celebrates the absolute centerpiece of human history and the Christian faith. I always smile on Easter Sunday because I wake up to a bunch of WhatsApp messages from a group of friends of mine that I probably haven't seen for a couple of years. Um, this was a group that I knew from across town, and they were kind of Christians. I think they went to Colchester Road, and we used to obviously kind of get together and meet regularly until a bunch of them selfishly moved to Bristol for work. But anyway, I remember going one year to a friend of mine. She just moved into a new place with a couple of people that were friends of hers, but I didn't know. And we went for kind of a housewarming kind of get together for her. And I think it was like maybe on the Saturday night of Easter weekend. And I remember walking in and seeing this banner. It was a sort of, she was quite crafty and flash like that. So it was sort of like one of those bunting things with the triangles and the letters in. And I'm looking at this thing and it says Heis Reisen. Heis Reisen. I'm thinking, oh, maybe some of these housemates she's living with are German. It's a bit weird. But anyway, and so I'm looking at this banner and I'm sort of stood in the room on my own. I'm going, Heis Reisen, Heis Reisen. And I'm sort of, as I'm looking at it, I'm getting progressively more German. I'm sort of like, Heis Reisen, Heis Reisen. And then she comes in, she's like, what? You all right? You're good. Anyway, turns out he is risen, just didn't have enough bunting to put the spaces in. So Easter Sunday for me is Heis Reisen Day, or if you prefer English, He is Risen Day, the day where everything changes for everyone. The moment that changes the course of human history, the fact that he is risen. Before we dive into thinking about the resurrection in more detail, and let me say this to those of you who may be kind of new with us, visiting, watching online, and perhaps just kind of dipping your toe in the water in terms of Christian faith. And maybe you wouldn't say that you have a faith of your own. Let me kind of acknowledge something that you may be thinking, which is that Easter is confusing. Easter is confusing. I came to faith back in 2010. I was about 21 years of age. But I remember as I was exploring faith, feeling really confused about Easter. Easter always seemed really odd to me. It was one of those points in the calendar where we would go and visit and do the church thing growing up, but I never really understood it. It always seemed odd to me that there was this weird tension around the weekend of Easter. I think it's partly because whenever I went to a Easter service, it was always billed as celebratory, yet it never lived up to the billing because there was always such a somberness around that. Now, for some of you, that might just be your experience of church. But for us, it was odd as a family looking in at Christianity from the outside because it was billed as a celebration, yet there was always this somberness around it. And I remember looking at the Good Friday story and thinking to myself, why do we even call this a celebration? When ultimately, on that very first Easter, it contains so much brutality. Doesn't feel like there's too much to celebrate here. And if that's you today, I just want to acknowledge I totally get that. I totally get it. And there is a sense in which, in some ways, you're kind of right, actually. Because when you consider the events of the cross, the Good Friday story in isolation, it is so brutal. It's savage. It is a day characterized by darkness, despair, and defeat. As Jesus himself cries out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? before breathing those final breaths. And in that moment, on that very first Good Friday, the hope of the world seemingly dissolves into defeat. It seems to be a tragic story, perhaps the most tragic of all stories. Yet one of the things I've come to realize over time is that the thing that defines a story as tragic or triumphant is not how the story begins. It's not even really about the journey. It's actually about how the story ends. And I want to encourage us for a moment to think about this idea through the lens of film. See, you could have a film that contains beautiful, joyful things throughout, beautiful and joyful beginnings. But if it ends in heartache and despair, the film is defined as a tragedy because tragedy has the final say. Equally, you could have a film that contains challenge, hardship, pain, trauma, and trial. But if the ending is characterized by restoration, happiness, redemption, delight, and victory, then it is a film defined as a triumph because triumph has that final word. And of course, this is the deal with Easter. Yes, Good Friday is brutal. It casts an intense shadow over the followers of Jesus. And we're right to feel, in a sense, the weight of that, the tension of that. We're right to feel the heaviness of that, the cost of the cross. It's right for us to feel an immense and immeasurable cost of Jesus dying on the cross. But of course, we're also right to not define it as tragic because the events of Good Friday are only the beginning of the story, never to be viewed in isolation. Instead, they're to be viewed through the light and triumph of Resurrection Sunday. They are to be seen and understood through the lens of resurrection hope. See, everything Jesus endures on Good Friday was only the beginning of the Easter story. And it's a story that ends and is characterized and defined by resurrection hope. A story where triumph truly does have the final word. And this is why earlier on I called Easter the centerpiece of the Christian faith, because it's all about resurrection hope. It's all about Jesus conquering the grave and rising again to defeat that last and final enemy, death itself. But it's also the fulfillment of God's promise. Let's take a look at a passage from Matthew chapter 28. This is verses 5 to 7 for those following along. There's this great little phrase within it. There's this great little phrase within it that I think we sometimes gloss over. Got it up here on the screen. Look. The angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He is risen again, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him." And I just love this little phrase in the middle that we sometimes are tempted to just fly past. He is not here. He is risen, just as he said. Just as he said. This is the fulfillment of a promise. It's happened just as he said. And revealed in these four little words is the wonderful truth that the resurrection of Jesus was the fulfillment of a promise that God made to his people time and time again throughout the Old Testament, that he would send his Messiah into the world to save it. And as well as a promise that Jesus himself spoke to his disciples about in Matthew 16, telling them that he must suffer and die and on the third day be raised to life again. As I said on Friday, the cross, it wasn't plan B. It wasn't a concession or a mistake or just kind of what ended up happening because the first bit went a bit wrong. This is what Jesus came to do. And he knew what he would have to endure, but he went to it willingly for me and for you. And nothing was going to stand in his way. As we spoke about on Friday, he resolutely set out for the cross. That means with determination. No stopping him, no turning back. And I'll never forget something I heard the preacher say on one of my first Easters in church. When I was starting to think about faith more deeply, he said, if someone manages to predict their own death and resurrection and then actually pull it off just as they have described it, then you should probably be willing to listen to what they have to say and take it seriously. He is not here. He has risen just as he said. And for a moment or two, I want to kind of focus in, I want to kind of zoom in on what this means for us in terms of life beyond this one, life into eternity. See, in the church, we often use the phrase, Jesus is the only way to heaven. And it's right that we do say that because this is simply a rewording of what Jesus himself says in John chapter 14, verse 6. Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But oftentimes, I think this statement, it can be a stumbling block for people. I understand why. Because I think a lot of people view this as kind of the church being kind of exclusive or intolerant or kind of closed-minded about other ideas. And I think as the church, not specifically Greenfinch, but the church in the UK, I think we've often done a bad job of responding to that. We've often just kind of gone on the back foot and gone, oh, yeah, maybe you're right. And I just won't say it. But I think that's actually just a misunderstanding of what this means. See, I think most people hear this statement and they think it sounds unfair, exclusive, narrow-minded to say Jesus is the only way to heaven. And I think sometimes the church has allowed the questioning of that statement to leave us feeling embarrassed or timid around it. But I don't think there's need for embarrassment or timidity about saying Jesus is the only way. Because what we're not saying when we use that phrase is that all religious leaders and religions are equal, but our God is quite belligerent, so it's his way or the highway. Instead, what we're saying is actually rooted in the Easter story. What we're essentially saying is that Jesus is the only way because Jesus is the only one who has conquered the grave. He's the only one who faced off with death and won. He's the only one that faced off with death and came out the other side. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. And for me, at least, I kind of feel like, you could try following another religious leader. But the truth is that if they didn't manage to overcome the grave for themselves, then how are they going to help you do it? You could try Muhammad or Buddha or any of those other religious figures who claim to be something special. But there isn't really any point because they died and they stayed in the grave. They died and they stayed dead. Not Jesus. He is the only one worth following because he's the only one that defeated death and rose again. He's the only one who proved his divinity. And here's kind of a cool way to think about it, right? Funny thing about being a leader is that most of the time you are going to get to the destination you're going before the people following you, right? That's logical. If you are leading, you will get to the people who are following you before the people who are following you. You're leading, you're going first. And Jesus, the only true, flawless leader, is at the right hand of the Father. Meanwhile, all those other guys who claim to be something special but weren't have stayed in their tombs. So when we're saying Jesus is the only way, we're not being argumentative, we're not being narrow-minded or exclusive or belligerent. We're simply stating the fact that of all the religious leaders who claim to be someone special, Jesus is the only one who backed it up. Jesus was the only one who proved it. And in proving it, he granted his followers the true, lasting, pure, incorruptible, and glorious joy that is resurrection hope. He's not here. He has risen just as he said. See, I love Easter because revealed in this Easter story is not a God who's distant, detached, disinterested, or disconnected from his creation, but rather we see the God who steps into our mess, steps into the darkness alongside us, and demonstrates the depth of his great love. He proves it. We see a God who sees his creation in trouble, and rather than just folding his arms and saying, well, they made their bed, he says, I'm going down there to save them, redeem them, and give myself for them. It is the genuine, the first, the original, my life for yours kind of love. And that's got to be a God worth celebrating. It's got to be a God worth following. Through the reality of the cross, we see the God who doesn't just say, I love you. He proves his love by fighting for us. We see a God who literally loves us to death and back again. To death and back again. And Easter teaches us some beautiful truths. Not least, it kind of shows us that the world, when the world gives us the kinds of things that the world gives us, disappointment, distress, sadness, sickness, funerals to attend, when it gives us COVID and conflict and crisis, when it gives us wounds that cannot be ignored or plastered over, Jesus intervenes and he gives us himself. And because of what he has done, we are people defined by triumph and not by tragedy, even if the road is rocky. Because Jesus has triumphed over the grave. Easter is the ultimate example of God bringing triumph out of tragedy and light out of darkness. It's like I said earlier, how the story ends determines whether it's a triumph or a tragedy. And as I was thinking about it this week, I was reminded of this old Chinese proverb. It kind of did the rounds on social media a bit last year. And it goes something like this. It says, a farmer and his son had a beloved horse who helped the family earn a living. One day, the horse ran away. Their neighbors exclaimed, your horse ran away. What terrible luck. The farmer replied, what do we know about these things? I guess we'll see. A few days later, the horse returned home, bringing with it to the farm a few wild horses. The neighbors came back and shouted, your horse has returned, and brought with it several other horses. This wasn't bad luck. This was good luck all along. This wasn't bad luck. This was good luck. Again, the farmer responded, what do we know about these things? I guess we'll see. Later that week, the farmer's son was out riding one of the horses, and it threw him to the ground, breaking his leg. The villagers cried out, your son broke his leg. This wasn't good luck, it was bad luck. The farmer replied, what do we know about these things? I guess we'll see. A few weeks later, the soldiers from the National Army marched through the town, recruiting all the able-bodied young men they could find to join the war effort. The farmer's son wasn't conscripted because he was still recovering from his injury. His neighbors shouted, your boy is spared. This wasn't bad luck, it was good luck. To which the farmer replied, what do we know about these things? I guess we'll see. Now listen, I appreciate that's just a proverb. But it's interesting that even in this short series of events, we can see that things that seem like darkness can be turned around in unlikely ways. And I want you to hear me really carefully with that, because what I'm not saying here is that every bad thing we go through or experience fits into this way of thinking about life. That's not what I think. And I'm certainly not looking to blow past or belittle or undermine any pain you may be experiencing now or have experienced in the past. However, I do think that this proverb, it does a good job of illustrating something that's true about life. That darkness can be turned around for light in unexpected ways, in ways that we never saw coming. And I think this is one of the key ways we should think about Easter, about the overarching story of God's work in our world. That he is the God who always works redemptively. He is always working to pursue restoration and to bring about healing and to turn darkness into light. And because of that, because of the cross, because of him, because he is risen, there is always purpose and potential, even in the most difficult challenges and unlikely of places, because he is always transforming the darkness with the glory of his light and loving kindness. And as is clearly demonstrated by Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, the God of the Bible is a master of redeeming dark situations in unexpected ways. A God who is constantly willing, able, and working to repurpose the darkness. And the resurrection of Jesus is the centerpiece of that reality. As I said on Friday, the cross is God's way of repurposing the darkness, transforming hatred, disgust, injustice, disdain, and the darkness of defeat and death into something else, a way back to God. As we heard in the video, Jesus is the king of an upside-down kingdom that is so different from anything we've ever seen before that the world could never understand it, let alone stop it. Now, I don't know where you're coming in from today. Maybe you've been a Christian a long, long time. Maybe this is your first time in church. Maybe you're someone who attends church regularly, but right now this stuff is head knowledge rather than heart knowledge. Maybe you're someone who is dragged along by a family member or a friend for Easter. Perhaps Jesus means everything to you. Perhaps you're just not sure yet what he means. But wherever you're at today, know this. Jesus is the king of an upside-down kingdom that is so different from anything we've ever seen before that the world could never understand it, let alone stop it. Why do I say that? Well, because when Jesus hits the scene, everything changes. Previous to Jesus, people thought the way to God was religion, religious observance. Be a good little boy or a good little girl. Keep the rules. Be a good person. Try your best. Be a goody-goody two-shoes. But through Christ, we now understand that no amount of us doing our best or trying to be a good person or playing the religious game can make us right with God. Christian faith is not about us having to be good enough so that God will like us. It's about the fact that he already likes us. And that through Jesus, he's more than enough. That through his death and resurrection, by placing our faith in him, we can be totally forgiven, set free, and brought back into the right relationship with God we were made for. And that because his tomb was empty on that first Easter Sunday, the grave holds no fear for those who call on his name. He's not here. He's risen just as he said. 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 3-5 says this: Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, in his great mercy that he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. I think as a culture, we are very good at looking back and blaming ourselves. We're also very good at looking to the left and the right and seeing all the stuff that's not how we would want it to be. However, this morning, I want to encourage us as we celebrate Jesus to look back to his resurrection. And as we do, look forward to our own, praising God that because Jesus lives, we too shall live.